Do you think it's just by coincidence? No, obviously God is showing us that Paul, when he was caught up to the third heaven, saw some of the very same things that John saw. And we can't miss that point because that's one of the most important identifying factors in the 144,000 here. He goes on down to say, the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were written the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. These are the men that God uses as the very backbone of his church, the doctrines that he gave them. He says in verse 15, and he who talked with me had a gold reed to measure the city, its gates and its wall. Before I go any further, this is one of the hardest things that I had trouble figuring out. Why did God use two different units of measure to measure the same temple? If you're going to go out and measure the dimensions of this wall right here, why would you use a yardstick, and then why would you use a meter stick? You know, there's not necessarily any need for it. But as you'll notice as I pointed out on this paper, in verse 15 and 16, he gives the dimensions of the city. He tells us that the city is laid out as a square, 4 square. The perimeter of the city is 12,000 furlongs. That means that if you start from this point right here and just go all the way around, you will have covered 12,000 furlongs by the time you walk around. Now that's a key point, because if you want to know what the size of any given side is, you just divide your 12 by 4 and you get 3,000 furlongs on any given side. Now we're getting a little closer to solving the riddle. If there are 3,000 furlongs on each side, and there are 3 gates on each side, how many furlongs do we have per gate? 1,000 furlongs per gate. We can interact here because I don't want to do a monologue here. But that leaves 1,000 furlongs per gate. Okay? Now that's really interesting, because when he went to measure the wall measured exactly 144 cubits. Interesting. 1,000 furlongs per gate, no matter which gate you come in, 1,000. 144 is the measure in cubits of the wall. Now, what is God trying to tell us here? Or is that just another one of those strange coincidences? I don't think so. But I took out my Strong's Concordance last night, and when I found out exactly what this meant, it blew my mind. In number 3444, as I brought out on the paper, he takes up on the definition given in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 18. In Isaiah chapter 60, verse 18, he says, I have appointed your walls for salvation. And when you look in Strong's, that term salvation means, it opens the door for a couple of other different substitutions. It can mean salvation, it can mean victory, it can mean blessing, okay? But basically it means victory over sin, because that's what salvation is. But the Hebrew rendering for that word is Yeshua. Well, the word Yeshua is the Old Testament name for Christ, or for Jesus. So what that's telling us there is that the 144 represents the perfect standard of Yeshua. In other words, if you look at the wall as representing righteousness, who was more righteous than Jesus? Nobody was. In fact, he is the very door by which we have to go in to get to the city of heaven. Now, and sometimes I don't know if God works with you this way, but sometimes I'll pray and I'll ask God, Lord, show me, what am I missing right here? How should I look at this? Maybe I should go and look at the same thing from a different viewpoint. And I got the idea to try an experiment. And so that's what we have right down here. It says we have written experiment. What if we put salvation on a scale from 0 to 144? Let's just say if we can analyze salvation mathematically, let's just say, a person that just barely wants to get into heaven by the skin of their teeth, all right, and doesn't want to go out and witness to anybody, and doesn't want to go out and pass out any tracts. He just wants to save his own soul, okay? We're going to rate him somewhere down 0 to 5. He's not going to be up there near 144, okay? Now let's say a person that's a little more zealous for the cause of Christ. He goes out and he visits the sick, and he'll pray. And he might read 1 verse of scripture per week. Okay, he's a little more. You might say he's a little closer to God. He's captured more of the spirit of what God is all about than the first person has. So we might give him a 50. But let's say you find a person that is totally sold out to Christ, a person that wants to do everything in their power to make their calling and election sure.